Hmm. Welcome back. Um, I've been out for a while. There's a lot of personal issues I'm trying to take care of, plus trying to write a couple of screenplays, trying to always sell, what I write, um, and helping a buddy with his storylines. Um, so this one is more for the book project that I want to write about. So I just want to give you some of the information of what I'm talking about on this part. So this is all about property taxes. So I'm writing a book on the side that just like gives information of items that I went down the rabbit hole on. And then are there some solutions that we might be able to do for that? Or what solutions do you think would work in your community, in your area? Uh, so everything's different. So here in Ohio, there was a group that trying to get rid of property taxes. And I understand why. Um, there was a lot of people that, retired or getting ready to retire. And, when you're set up and you're in a fixed income, what ends up happening is that your property taxes will go up 30%. You weren't budgeted for that. And with gas going up, food going up, you know, those types of things happen. But when they all happen at one time, it's hard for some people to, to be able to bounce back and struggle, no matter how good of a retirement plan you may have thought you had, especially if you're, you know, really on a tight budget, which a lot of people are, you know. So I reached out to that company and I said, hey, I have an idea of maybe it's revamping that. They replied back. They were nice. They replied back that they're focused on, their goal to just get rid of property taxes 100%. Now, I know a couple of states are trying to do that right now, but those states are primarily designed to be tourist states where people travel more to those states from other countries, from other cities, other states. That's where the state makes most of their income that they could offset that. We're not quite there yet in Ohio. We could be for certain avenues, a tourist destination. There's a lot of other things that'll go up into that, and I'll probably put those in the book. Um, but as far as for the property tax, here's my concern with property tax. If you own a home or thinking of buying a home and you remodel the kitchen or the bathroom, you put new appliances in, when the property tax goes up and your appraisal goes up because of all the remodeling you did, think about it this way. You're paying tax on the products you just bought every single year. You buy a new refrigerator, new dishwasher, new countersink. You just paid sales tax on all those items. Technically, you're paying sales tax on all those items every single year. That's like going to a bookstore, buying a book, and then every year going back to that bookstore and paying them sales tax on that book, right? That's basically what you're doing when they appraise it based on what they think the value of the home is, even though you've already paid taxes on those pieces already. So my thing for them was, and for anybody that's listening, that is, reach out to your congressman and say, hey, let's get rid of property taxes, but let's replace it with a land tax, which would be a lot simpler, right? Which would make it so much easier for somebody who's retired now, thinking of retiring in the next, 10 to 20 years, that has a plan, you know, it makes it so much easier for you to budget your future and know what your future is going to be like if we went to a straight land tax. So my proposal basically ran something like this, right? Each county can do it their own way, their own dollar amount based on what type of corporate businesses they want to bring in. But I'm just going to do the residential part. The commercial part, I reached out to a congressman, and we'll see where it goes from there. So let's say $75,000 an acre. Now that does not mean that you have to sell that land for 75,000, or that's the most or less you can get. You can sell it for less, you can get it for more, but this is an for a land tax appraisal point. right? So let's say you're sitting on a half an acre of land. Now, normally, what it'll end up being is that they'll say the land appraisal is $35,000 for the land, right? And then they'll say your home is $400,000, and you'll be taxed on that. So you could be looking at $2,000 to $3,000 a year in property taxes. If you remodel that home or do any add-ons to that home, you're going to pay 10, 20, 30% more on top of that. If we go to a land tax, right, you're going to be appraised on 35,000 for that half an acre. You're going to be appraised on the square footage. So if you only have 1,000 square feet home, that's what you're going to get appraised on. That's it, the square footage. So that $3,000 property tax will be down to about $1,800. That could be a big savings. Now that's, the savings will be different based on what your current appraisal is. But you're gonna have a home that's worth 200,000, you know, and at the same thing could end up saving you $700 a year, right? Any savings like that, from whether it's $500 to $1,000 to $1,500 in savings, right, would make a big difference when you're on a tight budget of being able to pay for your bills, your medical, and so forth. The other side of that is, one, if the government knows what their taxes are going to be coming in, they can better budget. I know that's a joke. Budgeting is not part of what the government does. But this now can give, homeowners the opportunity when it comes to paying their land tax to be able to open up, or not open up, but let me phrase it this way. This will give the county the opportunity to open a trust account for the school's EMS, that whenever you get your land bill, there'll be a section there. Do you want to donate to this trust fund? And that trust fund will sit there until it is needed. It'll be one of those where the state budget's too tight. Now you dip into the trust fund for EMS. You dip into the trust fund for the schools. You dip into that for that, where that trust fund can only be used for those types of services. And it gives people the opportunity to, in a certain area, to be able to say, yeah, I know the school wants to build a new, football stadium, or they want to tear up the field and put a new sod down. They want to add a STEM STEM classes to their curriculum, whatever it may be. That'll allow, the local districts to create their own levies, because it'll be easier to have a short-term levy that, for a couple of years, I can afford to pay this, or I can afford to put this into this trust account. So it gives people more opportunities. Now, corporate taxes and stuff like that, I have another version of that. Well, they'll pay more. So the burden comes off of us as a community, but gets put in its correct spots. The big advantage of doing a land tax also, besides making it easier for people to keep their homes and stay in their homes, and pass their homes down from generation to generation, this makes it easier for the states to reduce how much tax credits they give to corporations to move into their states. So instead of giving a company that wants to build a warehouse, a distribution center, 10, 20, $30 million in tax credits, they can easily go and say, this is our land tax. This is how much you're going to pay, which is half of what it would be anywhere else. And we'll give you $1 million credit to move in. Because they're going to save that money. Most companies are not going to move in here just for 2 or 3 years and spend millions of dollars to build a facility. They're going to be here for the long term. They can look at that information and go, well, we're going to be here for 10, 20 years. The amount we're going to save on that really don't need to have any tax credits from the state. Maybe for the first year to build, because they're not operational. That might be one incentive, but they don't need a 5-year tax credit to keep them running. This could actually save the state hundreds of millions of dollars to bring in new companies into, and then use that money back toward the schools, back toward the community, back toward paving roads and so forth. So there are an advantage of refining property taxes if it's done the right way. But to abolish it, we don't bring in as a state enough revenue to do that. We are not a tourist state, and most states are not. They may have some pockets of tourism, but they don't have enough pockets of tourism that's generating billions of dollars in tourists every month to keep it running, to be able to say we don't need a property tax to offset that. But like I said, if we do a land tax, we can then make it easier for people to move in, make it easier for people to like say, this is where we want to raise our family because this school is right here, the market's great, this is where we want to be. The only thing that hurts a land tax sometimes is outside investors. You get these outside companies that primarily will buy houses and jack it up. And that's the reason why property taxes are going up. You get these outside firms, they'll buy hundreds of pieces of property in the state or even in the county. And if they're not getting the dollar amount they want, they'll take them off the market. And then when they put them back on, they raise the price. And you could tell when it feels like you could tell which ones those are. Is you look at a house and that's going for $400,000, but all the other houses in the area are $300,000. But the furniture they already pre-furnish, or they all have the exact same wood, the exact same refrigerator, dishwasher, countertop, the kitchen, the bathroom, everything looks identical in every one of their homes. That's usually a good takeaway. Plus, if they bought the home for $150,000 at an auction, or someone had to sell and they bought dirt cheap, they want their money. They want to make that $100,000, $150,000 profit. You, on the other hand, side, are going to pay more for that house. And by paying more for that house and overpaying for a home, you're going to raise the property taxes for everyone else around you. But if you eliminate the property tax, if someone overpays for a home, it's not going to affect you down the road. So if that person wants to overpay for a piece of property, that's their right. But for the rest of the people in the community, you shouldn't have to be forced to pay higher taxes because one person paid an extra $100,000 over market to be in your neighborhood. And that will jack your prices up. Everyone wants their money. Everyone wants to, as far as the state's concerned, they want their money to build. But we can do things the right way for our citizens. We could do the right things for our community and build it up the right way. Question is, do we want to? Right? If you own a company that's in some other state, like Texas, Florida, New York, and you're buying 1,000 homes in Ohio, for example, you really don't care about the community, about the people, about their property taxes. You want that millions and millions of dollars in pure profit. And if you don't have to sell and you can take the properties off the market, guess what? The government's going to give you a big tax credit any which way. Real estate developers have done this for years, where they know if they don't sell a certain amount of pieces of property, or especially people that rent property, small developers can't get away with it. Big ones do. But they can end up getting away without paying taxes for years because they don't want to reduce the price or they don't rent. Same thing with an investment group. They got the money. They don't get the price they want. pull it off the market. Wait till the interest rate drops and then put it back on. Then it's more desirable for somebody to say, oh, I can afford that now, even though they're overpaying for it to begin with. So, like I said, it's up to us. I think a land tax would be a good way of doing it. I think a land tax would be something that would spur more businesses. It'll spur more entrepreneurs. Because if you have somebody that has that extra money and they want to start a shop, they want to start a business, they'll be able to do it now. And who knows what that next small business that comes out of a community is going to spur. What technologies are going to build on that? What's going to be the new best, biggest, and best thing out there? You know, but we got to give people that opportunity to try. You know, you can't try it if you're always in debt. It's a little harder to do that. But if you give them a little bit of room where they can at least get their feet wet and try something, let's do it. Maybe not being an entrepreneur is your thing, you know, but wouldn't it be nice if you could put money away if you own a home? If you could put money away for when you really need it, when an emergency comes up, or put money away to go on that special trip, that honeymoon, you know, that one spot you've always wanted to knock off your bucket list, or, you know, get on the bike and take several weeks, take a month, and just drive cross country and visit as many places as you've always wanted to do. Hit the open road the right way. You could do that if you know what your property taxes are going to be all the time. You can do that if there is a certainty down the road. And you can retire and have wealth for the next generation going down. And we could build a really nice community around us with nice parks and everything else if we all work together. That's just my 2 cents on that part. Um, and I've gone down this rabbit hole for a different storyline for spin doctors, and I'll talk about spin doctors later on. But I just wanted to get that out. I will be putting some of that into a book format. Um, don't know where that's going to go. I'm just primarily right now just writing it for me. Um, I might just make it an ebook and just throw it out there and just see what the hell happens with it once I finish it. Don't expect that anytime soon. I'm focused right now on the screenplays and trying to sell that because I really want to get a couple of projects out the door and start raising money for that. But I just wanted to get my 2 cents out. Like I said, I have reached out to one senator so far, and I'll reach out to a couple. I'll send them out the same information, see who's interested. You know, who knows? Maybe we could do something or get enough people behind to start reaching out. You know, not just in this state, but think about the states you're in, or think about where you're at. How easy would that be, or how great would that be if you knew what your property taxes were going to be all the way down, whether it's for private property or even for commercial. If, you know, for businesses, if you know what your expenditures are going to be 5, 10 years from now, it makes it so much easier to hire people and do things. It makes it so much easier to buy equipment and do things when you know that things are not going to, you know, jump up automatically down the road. So I'll leave it at that. Have a good day, and I'll have something else down the road. All right.